Loki's character is centered around drama, which makes sense since he is Mr. Mischief. I'm a big Marvel fan and actually MCU fan, so I love the Loki series and of course the Thor movies, and I've seen how Loki is moving in those series. And of course just in mythology in general when it comes to the origins of Loki. And then you have to talk about Luffy was feeling a tingling sensation, and Zoro said, "Are you good?" And Sanji said, "I ain't going," and neither is Zoro because he did not want Zoro to get lost. So Luffy went to go check it out. Oda is obviously building up the prince from the very start over any other giant. Oda then gives Dory and Baragi a 1.8 billion berry bounty, and from how they did the Kid Pirates and their performance on Egghead Island, I don't blame Oda, but this again was to hype up Loki, who had a 2.6 special bounty. 2.6 million berry special bounty, and the fact that he's claiming to be the Sun God Nika, aka Joy Boy, aka Monkey D. Luffy, who's the only one speaking to bro, yeah, that's hilarious. Loki states he's the pride of Elbaf's immense strength and can't use his Devil Fruit because of the Sea Stone chains, the same legendary Devil Fruit he stole after killing his father King Harold, which automatically makes me think he's a villain, and he's been locked for 6 years, the same time Shanks became a Yonko. And of course, it's even bad-mouthing Shanks, and Shanks used Haki just recently on Elbaf in the underworld when meeting with Loki. I wonder what was discussed when these two met up. This is 6 years after I think Shanks actually helped take him down, and when Luffy attacks Loki, Loki says he'll give Luffy a quick death in his mind, showing no fear even after seeing Luffy taming the beast that he befriended as a kid. And of course, Gear 4th coming out, and Luffy's Gear 4th is not the same Gear 4th we saw on Wano or Whole Cake Island. It's a new and improved, so Loki's power seems to be legit, and not just legit, broken as well. Keyword quick death. I think he has some hacks that Luffy definitely should be worried about, and Luffy making a deal with Loki is making a deal with the devil. Loki will betray Luffy, causing Elbaf plot to form. Yes, it's going to get interesting too, because we know the Giants do not want Luffy to actually release Loki. But to understand why Luffy's in trouble, I must do a deep dive on Luffy's opponents post-timeskip and the pattern that we've been seeing shown through Oda manga. First things first is Fishman Island, and there's Hody versus Luffy. And when we see Hody versus Luffy, we see Zoro take him out underwater at first, but Hody uses these steroid abilities that make him stronger, and that's when he becomes a problem. And we see Luffy relatively dealing with Hody with ease, but when it comes to the water and Luffy not being able to fight truly effectively because of his Devil Fruit ability, Hody then has his advantage with that white hair steroid form. Now, of course, Luffy does figure out a way to stop Hody, but we start to see that Oda, just because the opponent is weaker, Oda will still give Luffy trouble if they're the villain. And then we have Caesar the Clown, and Caesar versus Luffy is when even Zoro has to speak up. Yep, that's right. Caesar actually takes away the oxygen and defeats Luffy. And Zoro is in complete shock. Like, this is the beginning of the new world, and my captain's already losing to guys like this? Because Caesar, let's be honest, he wasn't that powerful compared to Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. So of course Zoro gave Luffy that speech, and Luffy came back and said, "I'm not going to lose to this guy," and actually one-shot him with Grizzly Magnum, showing how powerful Luffy was when he's locked in. Now, of course, when it comes to Hody and Caesar, I just want to show that even weaker villains, Luffy does still have a struggle in the arc. But when it comes to a legit villain, Doflamingo was Luffy's first legit villain, and again, he struggles when it comes to, of course, Doflamingo with his puppeteering, getting him to fight Bellamy for a little bit, and then of course Doflamingo fighting Luffy, and his Luffy just taunting him, saying your punches are not that powerful, your speed is not there. When it comes to Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd, he gives respect to Gear 3rd, saying you have power but not speed. He gives respect to Gear 2nd, saying you have speed but not power. And then of course forces Luffy to go Gear 4th, the first time we ever see it, and he's kicking Doflamingo's ass, but of course time runs out, and that's when Doflamingo becomes a real problem, and Doflamingo even awakens his Devil Fruit. So definitely gotta say, this was an interesting battle, but of course Luffy locks in, brings out the King Kong gun, and defeats Doflamingo. And of course, a Willow D member feeding the Celestial Dragon has more meaning than you actually think. But I'm telling you guys right now, regardless, the first 3 villains that Luffy fights, 3 times he struggled. Then we get into the versus Emperor saga, and we see Luffy really is speedrunning some of these battles, with Cracker, a Yonko commander worth 860 million berry, pretty high bounty, and his armor haki is already seen to be more stronger than Doflamingo, though Doflamingo is an awakened user with Conqueror's haki. Cracker's armor haki was legit, and Luffy definitely with his gear 4th form was struggling with Cracker, that they had to get help from Nami, of course, and of course that was when he brought out Tank Man and defeated Cracker, but still getting help, he got struggled the same way he got help against Doflamingo with the Coliseum fighters and Guts. And I'm telling you guys right now, Luffy, regardless if Luffy does end up winning, he does see a struggle. And then Katakuri, in my opinion, is when power scaling in One Piece changed entirely, because haki blooming became a thing, and Luffy for the first time didn't get help against Katakuri. Like, if anything, Katakuri got help with Flampe, and Luffy said, no, there's no honor in a pirate's fight, and Katakuri injured himself to make it even. And this is why it's one of the greatest fights in One Piece, because there was no help. Luffy and Katakuri were just throwing straight hands, and Luffy wanted to surpass him, and that's what he did when it's all said and done. But yeah, there was probably one of the greatest struggles of all Luffy's fights up until this point, and it's the fight where he got the least help. So even when Luffy doesn't get help, Luffy sees a struggle. And then of course there's Kaido versus Luffy, and this Kaido versus Luffy was always like a confusing moment, because even Ichiro Oda told us before the arc that he did not know how Kaido would be defeated. And of course, we first seen it, of course, in Kuri when Luffy brought out his best gear 4th attacks on Kaido, even doing an elephant gun on Kaido's dragon form. None of that shit affected Kaido. Kaido just got up and did a Thunder Bagua and one-shot him with a Conqueror's Haki coded attack. Luffy went to Prison of Udon, got better in his armor and haki. He already had amazing future sight. Dodges a Thunder Bagua on the rooftop, hits him with a red rock with advanced armor haki that breaks you from within, really damages Kaido, and Kaido's like, yeah, this guy's legit, he's actually capable of fighting me. And then of course Luffy gets hit with that Ragnarok, gets knocked out. Luffy gets Conqueror's Haki coding, battles with Kaido for the first time toe to toe, and then loses again. And Kaido says, "You're not Joy Boy." Luffy gets back, returns to fight, uses Conqueror's Haki coding in his gears, in his Snake Man form, in his Bounce Man form. Really is going toe to toe with Kaido. Goes all out with that Supreme Gatling, or whatever you want to call it, Supreme Kong Gatling, whatever you want to call the attack. Or it was just a Conqueror's Haki coding gear 4th incredible attack. He tried to do it again and got interrupted by CP0 and gets knocked out again. Mind you, Luffy's getting help from the Red Scabbards, Yamato, the Rooftop, with other Worst Generation members. I can go on, guys. Even Momonosuke, guys. Luffy is getting aided in this battle and still is struggling to the point where Kaido beats him again, and he has to go gear 5th awakening Joy Boy form, Nika Devil Fruit ability, and still was struggling. And of course, Kaido could even avoid Luffy's last attack, but Kaido said, you know what, I'll face it, because I'm the strongest creature alive. I can't run away from it, I have to confront it. And that's when of course Luffy coded his attack with advanced armor haki with his awakening and Conqueror's Haki coding, and defeated Kaido with that Bajirang gun. But if you guys can see the way I'm talking about Kaido vs Luffy, it was the most struggle we've seen ever. So Oda has this pattern we've seen post-time skip. Doesn't matter if the opponent's weaker than Luffy, doesn't matter if the opponent's stronger than Luffy, you're gonna see Luffy struggle regardless. Now of course, in my opinion, the first time we actually see Luffy not struggle is Luchi, but I never saw Luchi Naked Island as Luffy's opponent. I seen him more as Zoro's opponent. And even then, Zoro did Luchi dirty, like fucking him up, and still Luchi was standing, and Jinbei had to knock him back and interrupt, which made Luchi look pretty good for his awakened zone form. But yeah, Luffy was dealing with Luchi pretty easy. It was kind of just a callback to Enies Lobby for fans to see how powerful the Yonko has gotten when it comes to Luffy. He's reached Yonko status, and he's on another level, and Luchi's a perfect opponent to bring out to show how Luffy's reached Yonko level. And it was the first time we see Luffy not struggle. Even against Cracker, he struggled. Luchi, he did not struggle against Awakened Zone Haki user in Luchi with the CP0 techniques. Yeah, so I gotta admit, this is the first time the pattern doesn't show up. But like I said, Luchi's not his opponent. His opponent is actually Kizaru and the Admiral. And that's when we see Luffy actually struggle, because he has the same thing that happens against Doflamingo. His gear 5th runs out. First he uses Snake Man, and of course that Kankasaki coding, and of course that's what, even in his base form, he's using Kankasaki coding against Kizaru, and Kizaru like, oh, now I see how you defeated Kaido. Then he goes into his gear 5th form and really hits Kizaru with a punch that really knocks him down and makes him not able to move. But of course he can't go into gear 5th because his time ran out. And then of course Kizaru even snuck him food to get his energy back, and then he was able to actually deal with Kizaru and Saturn at the same time. But still, Saturn got back up. Kizaru got sent all the way flying and stayed down. After killing Vegapunk, he already knew his mission was complete. And honestly, I would say this right now, Luffy struggled. It wasn't as clear cut against Kizaru as you think. It actually had the same trope that we've been seeing post-timeskip, and Kizaru, in my opinion, was Luffy's opponent at Egghead Island. It wasn't Lucci, so definitely Oda continued the pattern, in my opinion. Then of course the Gorosei came involved with Saturn and the rest of the Gorosei, and honestly Luffy struggled here too. Yes, he was doing devastating attacks, but they were immortal and they were coming back. And even some of the characters like Warkery, Luffy's attacks weren't even working. So definitely was scary when Luffy in his Gear 5th conquers Haki coding is not affecting a Gorosei member in Warkery. Yeah, the other Gorosei were getting affected, but they were getting given back to normal because they're immortal. And I'm telling you guys right now, that is definitely scary, making you think, how does Luffy actually go against Warkery? Struggle was seen against Kizaru, and struggle was seen against the Gorosei. And that's where we're at right now in the current story. And this is where we bring Elbaf involved in Loki. And the first time we actually talk about Loki is during Whole Cake Island, where he was claiming love at first sight. Keyword claiming, it said claim, so it seems like there's some trickery going on here with the ugly Lola. Sorry if people who think Lola's attractive. To me, she's ugly. And he's trying to, in my opinion, he's trying to finesse Big Mom somehow. When there's actually shows Loki falling in love with Lola in the story, I think there's going to be some trickery going on here, in my opinion. And of course, Loki was the key for Big Mom to squash her long beef with the Giants, and of course use the warriors, the mighty warriors of Elbaf, to her advantage, of course, to get the One Piece. As we all know, I have a video coming on Big Mom that's going to be talking about her coming back. So definitely stay tuned for that. It's going to be really sick. And then, of course, Big Mom's flashback is literally celebrating the recent birth of Prince Loki. I think Big Mom, of course, Mother Karma and her sun power that Big Mom now has, there's ties here. And it's going to be big when, of course, the Elbaf arc continues. There's so much lore with Loki. If Loki is a prevalent character in Big Mom's flashback, what do you think is going to happen in the actual Elbaf story that he's involved with Luffy, guys? So yeah, Loki, in my opinion, is a villain, and he is an opponent for Luffy. And he has a legendary Devil Fruit, and it's going to be broken, and it's going to catch Luffy by surprise. And I think Luffy might be MIA most of the arc because of this confrontation with Loki. And honestly, some people might even consider this in the fan base as Luffy losing to Loki, which would be shocking. New Yonko, who's fighting admirals, and Gorosei losing to a giant in Elbaf. Definitely would make Elbaf a better arc, in my opinion. And of course, I think Luffy will come back later on in the arc and save the day and become the hero of Elbaf. Remember, Shanks told that kid that, remember the name Monkey D. Luffy. I think Usopp will carry the load with him trying to become a brave warrior to sea. He'll take a lot of that main character role from Luffy. But yeah, expect Luffy to struggle against Loki. I'm saying this right now in this video. Come back to this video if I'm wrong. I believe he'll struggle because the pattern Oda has shown us. Do I think Loki's the final villain? I'm not too sure. I think he could be that cracker, Kizaru-esque villain where Luffy fights someone else after. Kind of like how you fought Katakuri after, and then you fought the Gorosei after. I think Luffy could fight someone else after. It could be Useless Kid, it could be Green Bull, it could be anybody. But honestly, I think that this is important when it comes to the greater One Piece story. Luffy at this peak, falling to some broken move, will shock the fan base entirely, guys.